I have said many times that wherever you are, anywhere in the world, there is always, guaranteed, there is always something near you that is interesting. You just need to look. I've just had an email from Sylvia and Philip who don't agree. They've told me that they drove up this road and they parked right here, as they said, by the gate with the sign. There's only one gate with a sign. They said not only was it boring, but other than some grass and some rocks, there was absolutely nothing of any interest whatsoever. And they even attached a photograph of themselves next to that gate. Well, they were actually sat in their car. So Sylvia and Philip have very kindly said that they will make a large charitable donation if I can tell them anything at all interesting about that field. Okay, I do like a challenge. So I'm not going to tell you one interesting thing about that field. I'll try and find, what shall I go, 10 extremely interesting things about this area, that field and this area. Oh, the only thing else I'll add for the benefit of Sylvia and Philip. To find most interesting things, you do actually need to get out of your car occasionally. So, number 1 of 10 interesting things about this place. Let's start with the name itself, Langscar Gate. And it's not the physical gate, but it's what this area is called around it. This is Langscar Gate. And as I explained in my extremely interesting video about Fairfleet's Gate, in this area, names can tell us a great deal about the history of something. Lang is an Anglo-Saxon word meaning long. Now, remember that the Vikings arrived in this area in about the late 8th to 9th centuries. So anything with an Anglo-Saxon element in the name must have already been in use before the Vikings arrived. So, now, scar comes from the Viking skor, meaning cliff, and gate, in this case, comes from the Viking gata, meaning a road. So it's not a physical gate, but it's a route. And so Langscar Gate itself literally translates as the road by the long cliff. And if you look behind me there, that is Langscar, the long cliff. And if you look to my right here, that is the long road. Now you can follow that all the way to Scotland. So, you know, and as it translates from the Anglo-Saxon and Viking to medieval English, this means that people have been passing through this area, well, for well over 1,000 years. I mean, come on, Sylvia and Philip. That is, to me anyway, the first interesting thing. And we're still exactly where you parked your car. Let's go and find the next thing. So let's have a look at the track itself that I'm walking on. This track had already been in use for centuries, but by the mid-12th century, it was adopted by the Cistercian monks from Fountains Abbey. They owned vast tracts of land in this area. The monks used this as a wool road, transporting fleeces, which were a major export to Europe at that time, and also for moving livestock, you know, between the seasonal grazing grounds. After the dissolution of the monasteries, I forget the exact date. I think it was during the 1530s. Anyway, after that, this track became a major commercial inter-valley route, and it was called the Galloway Gate. Don't forget, gate is from the Viking gata, you know, meaning road. It had this name because Galloway cattle were driven all the way from southwest Scotland to the to the great livestock fairs in Settle and Malham. Also, Jaegers used to lead trains of up to 60 pack horses along this very track, and they would carry salt and coal and wool and other essential goods. In fact, this route was so important that in the 1880 Ordnance Survey map, it was actually marked as a BR, which a bridle road, which isn't like the modern bridle way, but a bridle road was built for traffic. So there you go, that's number 2. Interesting point. And we're only 100 meters from where you parked. So I'm just, ooh, what have we here? I've not noticed that before. I'll turn the camera round so you can see what I'm looking at. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see the hill? There, it goes up. In every direction, it goes up. Except for there. Can you see that flat area there? That is not natural. Let's walk over there and see if that's number 3. Interesting point. Hopefully it will be. Can you see this feature here? This big circle? I'll leave the camera on wide angle so you can see it. Hopefully you can make it out. In some places these are called stock tanks, but here in the Yorkshire Dales they're known as meres, and this is one. In this area it rains a lot, but the ground is limestone, and so any surface water quickly drains away, and that is a problem if you're a farmer with livestock, sheep and cattle, because there are very few natural streams here on the the tops of the hills. So what they did is they would build these meres. It's a shallow, wide depression is dug first, and then it's lined with clay, which is normally brought up from the valley, from the rivers. There is a river a couple of miles that way. The clay is then mixed with lime or soot, which this is to discourage worms from burrowing up through it. And it's the clay that makes it waterproof. Then a thick layer of straw is laid over the top to stop the clay drying out in the sun, and it could cause cracking during the summer, and then it wouldn't be waterproof. And finally, these large stones that you can see here, they're actually put on top, and that's to stop the clay and the straw being pierced by the hooves of cattle and sheep. It won't hold water for months, but up here that doesn't matter. It only needs to hold water for a few days, because every day it's going to rain very soon. The forecast for here tomorrow is interesting. I'm glad I'm up here today. Anyway, so I think that's interesting thing number 3. We have found a mere. So we're going to continue on up the track and see what we I'd just like to introduce the sponsor of our video. This is Dolly the sheep. Hopefully you can see her. So don't forget, if you buy anything wool, always get it from Dolly and her friends. They're the best sheep. I'd be awful if I had a sponsor for this channel. No, I don't want one of those. But, mind you, on a more serious note, let me turn the camera around. Can you actually see? Let me just point it at it. Can you see that? Can you see where the sheep are? Look there. I think we've just found the next interesting thing. Let me put this up here. So, there is always something interesting. You just have to look. Not the sheep. But can you see? Let me come over here. Can you actually see these rocks here? What do you think that is? There. What do you think that... I know, it's a rock. Let's carry on up and see if we can find a... If you look... Oh, I've scared the sponsor of today's video. Do you know what this is? You have to find this interesting. Everybody does. It'd be impossible not to find this. Can you see this section of concave limestone here running along the track? What do you think this is? And if you look, it runs all the way there and all the way down there. Any ideas? No. This used to be the inside wall of a cave. You know, how amazing is that? In this area, the bedrock is limestone, and during the last ice age and just after it, there was much more water flowing around this area, and over thousands of years, slightly acidic rainwater seeps into the cracks and, you know, enlarges them. At some point, all this water that's now underground starts to flow downwards, and as it does, it erodes the rocks at the sides and below, and this forms underground passages, caves. And yes, here it is. This is it. At some point in the distant past, right here, so you'd have water dissolving the rock from above and water eroding the rock, you know, from the sides. And so eventually the cave roof gets thinner and thinner, and it becomes unstable and unable to support its own weight, and it collapses. You know, the fallen rock was gradually broken up and weathered and washed away over time, and all that remains now is this curved line, the inside surface of the original cave wall, which ran along there. So what you're looking at now is not just a rock face, it's the ghost of a cave. I mean, Sylvia and Philip, I think we're doing rather well with these interesting facts about this, what do you call it? A boring film, a boring field. Let's carry on. And here's another interesting thing. I think this is number 5. Have a look at this. Look at this big stone. It looks out of place. It's different from the rest of the wall. And this wall goes for miles, and it all looks the same except for this. So something was here, and it's been replaced by that. So what we can do is we can look at the, let's just get it up on the screen. Hang on. Oops, the incorrect password, hang on. Right, so, oh, there it is. So, you won't be able, I'll put this on your screen. This spot is marked with a small circle with a dot in the centre. So there was a boundary marker here. But it's gone, it's been moved. More specifically, this was a parish boundary marker. So land on one side of the marker belonged to one parish, and land on the other side belonged to Malham Parish. Now, if you're not from the UK, by the way, this might seem slightly strange and slightly odd. In England, government works in layers. At the top you have the central government in London, and they create national laws and national budgets and look after the military and what have you. Below that you have county and unitary councils, and they deal with the big items such as schools and roads and hospitals, social care, etc. Right at the bottom of the government layers sits the parish councils. They're very small, very local. Think Vicar of Dibley. And while they are legally part of the governing structure, they mainly deal with the bits and pieces, you know, village halls, allotments, town benches, bus shelters, and that sort of thing. Parishes were originally established in, I think, somewhere between the 8th century and the 12th century in different areas. And they were there to support the local church and its priest through tithes, basically a tax on produce. I did a video about that a while ago. Over time, they became convenient administrative units, and I think it was 1894, but somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. The Local Government Act formalised the modern system by creating elected parish councils to take over the non-religious duties, you know, from the local church. Now, here's an extra interesting thing. I'll call this interesting thing 5B. if we look at, I'll put the 1830 map back on your screen. This boundary stone is marked, but on the modern maps, it isn't. So the Malham Parish boundary now lies on the other side of Drystone, which is about a kilometre and a half in that direction to the west. This means that this stone has been moved because the boundary no longer exists at this point. So this is an administrative fossil. So Sylvia and Philip, I know it still looks like grass and rocks, but some of the rocks, you know, you just see a rock in a wall like this, and if you think about it and look at some old maps, you can actually work out why it's there. You know, I mean, this is a really old wall. You know, probably, definitely medieval, probably even before that, probably even earlier than that. You can tell that just by looking at the wall itself. These stones are not from a quarry. They've just literally been picked off the ground and piled up in big long, which is why there are very few stones lying around these fields. You can tell that. Let me find one. Oh, there's one. Can you see this stone here? Can you see? I'm not going to pull it out because the wall might fall over. But can you see how smooth that rock is? Yeah, that can only have been smoothed off by water or ice. But it wouldn't be that smooth if it was from a quarry and it had been underground. Let me find another one. Here's one. Let me have a look. So there. I'll bring this. Oh yeah, this is a really, look at this. Can you see this slight indentation in the rock there? That can only have been formed by rainwater, which is slightly acidic, sitting on the rock and dissolving it over hundreds and hundreds of years. And if it had been underground, the rainwater wouldn't have got there to be able to sit in it and smooth it off. So this is probably 1,000-year-old wall. You know, probably older actually. Maybe late Anglo-Saxon, early Viking. So you're looking at about 8th century. So that's, Jesus, that's 1,200 years old. Oh well, let's carry on walking up there, and we will see what other interesting things we can find for Sylvia and Philip. We're nearly at the top of the field. We're getting there. As I mentioned earlier on, this route, this track, was once used to drive cattle down from southern Scotland to the fairs in Malham and Settle in this area. But there's a problem down there. The track we've just walked along doesn't actually go to Malham. So something is missing, or more likely something has moved. Basically, you wouldn't drive cattle all the way down from southern Scotland only to take a wrong turn, you know, a few miles from the end of the route. So let's have a look at the 1830 map again. I'll drop it onto your screen. This map is 6 inches to the mile, which makes measuring exact distances off a mobile phone screen slightly awkward compared to a modern 1 to 25,000 map. But we don't actually need to measure distance, we just need a direction. So let's have a look at the map. If you look at the alignment of the track on both maps, I'll put them on your screen, you'll see that they run roughly on a bearing of 110 degrees or thereabouts before turning left onto 70 degrees approximately. But on the 1830 map, the old route continues on that original 110 degree line. So all we have to do is find the point where the modern track bends and then ignore the turn. If we keep going in the original 110 direction, and if my reasoning is correct, it should lead us to the old route. So let's walk back down the track and see if we can find it. So I've just walked down the path for a slight while, and as you can see, the track goes in that direction, and then I'll turn the camera around so you can see, and just below me down there it bends round to the left, and it's approximately on the right direction. So here And here, wow, I didn't expect to find it so easily. You can actually still make out the original track. In fact, I'm actually walking on it now. Let me turn the camera around so you can actually see it. Bear with. Hopefully you can see that. So there is the original track. It sort of goes down in that direction and it's heading off in the right way. So, you know, how amazing is this? So this track that I'm walking on now, I mean, it's just a line of grass in between the rocks at the moment, but this hasn't been used for over 150 years. But before that, for hundreds of centuries before that, thousands of cattle were driven all the way hundreds of miles, and this was the last section of their walk. I just think it's amazing that, well, and hopefully interesting. I mean, this is real. Indiana Jones would be pleased with me, I think, to actually find something like this. This is, it's not just interesting. I don't know. I find it quite moving. But you can actually still make out the original track that was taken away 150 years ago. Oh well, enough waffle. Let's carry on up right to the top of the track and see what we can find. And this is as far as we can go. We've reached the top of the field. Well, Sylvia and Philip's field. Now, I'll just show you here. If you look at the 1830 map of this area, it shows two mine shafts between the hook and this stretch of track here. I can't actually see them at the moment, but if they're on the map, we know they're there. And in this part of the world, old mine shafts are often either just left open or covered with something, how can I put it, extremely unconvincing. So I shan't be wandering in this little area over there. Now, you may be wondering, I'm sure you are, on the 1830 map, what is that little symbol that looks like a handwritten 5? It looks vaguely Greek or possibly Roman, slightly mysterious. It was actually invented by the UK Ordnance Survey. It's called a land hook. How can I explain a land hook? It was used to show that two or more areas of land separated by a boundary, such as this wall here, or the track that we've just walked up, they were legally part of the same parcel of land. So you'll find them on tithe maps and early large-scale Ordnance Survey maps, but it isn't used anymore. Now, this entire area is scattered with lead mines, and many of them are still exposed. Literally, just a very, very deep hole in the ground. Now, I don't know any other part of Britain where mine shafts were dug. They were worked, and then when they ran out, they were simply abandoned, only for another one to be dug a short distance away. This means that you really do need to be very careful when walking around here, especially at night. So I'm going to go up there and I'll show you what I mean, which I find this extremely interesting. So let's go and find, I don't know about walking across snow. I'd rather walk on sandy beaches in Tenerife. 35 degrees and there's a cafe just over there. Oh, right, I'll keep walking and then we'll have another chat when I find some big holes in the ground. I don't know if you can see behind me, I'll point it out. This hole in the ground here. There's another one here, I'll show you. Let me turn it around. That one is just scary. that is just a, Jesus. I don't know. I mean, it's okay. If you know they're here, then, you can mind where you're going. But as an example, just here. Can you see this one? This whole area is just littered with old open mine shafts. I'll turn this one there. Can you see this one here? Just this one. I'm keeping away from them. There's another one in front of me there. Now, these don't seem to have been productive mines. So they've dug down. I don't know how far they have to dig. And they haven't found anything, because you can tell the mines that were actually productive. Let me go and find one. I'll come back to you. So here's a good example of one that actually was productive, and we know it. I'll try and arrange the... Can you see this huge hole in the ground here? Hopefully you can. Let's have a look. So the reason we know it was productive is because of the spoil heap. So, which is, should have brought a tripod today, shouldn't I? A bigger one. So, let me turn this around. I'll point this here. Can you see this area on the floor in front of me where nothing is growing? Because they would bring the, you know, the rocks and dirt and everything out of the mine, and then separate the lead and take it down into the valley for smelting. But if it wasn't very good quality, they would literally just dump it on the floor outside the mine, and you were left with these marks, because this spoil from the mine contained lead, basically heavy metal. And here we are, look at this. I'll turn it around so you can see this. Hundreds of years later, and still nothing is growing on it. You know, so environmental damage, it isn't a new thing. Anyway, so there's another interesting thing. Lead mines. And, well, in this area, open lead mines. So if you do come up to this area, Sylvia and Philip, if you get out your car and do come walking, don't come at night, and if you do, watch where you're going. Let's carry on. And speaking of rocks, this area is covered in literally hundreds of miles of drystone walls. But it wasn't always like this. Okay, some of them are over 1,000 years old, well over 1,000. And some were built during the medieval period on the orders of the monasteries, such as Fountains Abbey and Byland Abbey, and they owned large parts of this area of England. The drystone walls in this area, they were built for a number of reasons. To mark boundaries, to manage vast flocks of sheep, and in some cases protect them from wolves and other predators. Some of them, though, were built for very specific purposes. As an example, can you see the wall behind me there, and the one that joins on it and disappears over the horizon? That forms a very long, thin field, and there are quite a few of them next to the track that we've just been on. The reason for this is, do you remember that I said the track used to be called the Galloway Gate, as huge herds of cattle were brought down from southern Scotland, you know, to the local fairs and cattle markets in Settle and Malham and this area. These long, thin fields were formed so they had somewhere to put the cattle, so they could rest and graze at night, you know, in relative safety before continuing their journey. But today, we're only looking what's inside this field, so we can't look at that one over there, so forget I mentioned that. That was a free, interesting bit. Most of the walls around here were built between 1750 and 1850, and the main reason for this massive construction effort was the Enclosure Act. This was a law, or these were laws, that allowed landowners to enclose formerly common land, moorland and high pasture, and this removed the traditional grazing rights and turned shared land into private property. I'll give you an example. Let me turn the camera around. Can you see this wall here? This wall isn't on the 1830 map, but it is on the 1880 map. And so the maps tell us very roughly when this wall was built. So this wall here that you can see is between 150 and 200 years old, which is, you know, for around this area, that's quite a new wall. You know, we'll call it 175, you know, we'll average it. But for this area, that is a relatively new wall. And if you look at it, it's still solid all the way along. It's a well-made wall. Oh, I know. Let's walk down this wall. I've definitely got something interesting to show you. So that's one thing interesting about this wall, how old it is. But as I said, there is one more really interesting thing that shows us that people have always been careful with their money. I remember from my school history classes, a Roman called Cato the Elder said, "Buy not what you want, but what you have need of." And 1500 years later, Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales, in which he noted, what did he say? "Just as a man needs his money to be spent, so does he need it to be kept." And obviously the farmer who had this wall built, you know, 200, 150 years ago, had the same thoughts as Cato and Chaucer. Don't spend your money if you don't need to. Now, most of the stones in these walls around here came from Dean Scar. You remember the road by the Long Cliff, which is only a few hundred meters from Langscar Gate, where they parked their car. But quarried stone had to be paid for and transported. And as you can see, the stone that he bought, the farmer, let me turn the camera around and I'll show you what I mean. Wait there a minute. Can you see this? Two different types of stones. Quarried stones, the big ones, and small flat stones, which are here. Can hopefully, so the line, the join is here. Yeah. So the farmer literally ran out of quarried stone there. So he got his men or his family just to dig a hole in the ground and say, you know, use the stone out of the ground for that. Once again, let me turn the camera around. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. And this is it. This is the hole that the farmer had dug, you know, on his own field when the quarried stone ran out. Can you see the shape of these stones here? Or these ones here? Can you see the shape? It is exactly the same as the stones in the wall where he ran out. So, you know, you can see the join there. And he probably thought to himself, I'm not paying for more quarried stone when I've got all this land. Dig a hole. And this is it. I mean, how amazing is this? This is history that you can touch and you can see the results. Quarried stone, I don't know, stone from the ground here. I don't know what the difference is. You have to be amazed by this. This is not some abstract history from a book that your school teacher was teaching you about years ago. This is actual history here. You can touch it, you can see it, you can walk in it. And more importantly, you know exactly what happened. Because look at these stones here. Can you see they're about this, the fractures in the rock. So all you do is either use a hammer and a piece of metal, or if they're really big, put a piece of water in it and put a bit of wood on inside the crack, pour water on it and let it expand. But look at that piece of rock there. Can you see this piece? Look at that piece there. Hopefully you can see that. Let me turn the camera around again. Hopefully you can see it. There's the quarried stone, and here is the stone. It's not turned round enough, is it? Let me do it again. There you go. So there's the quarried stone, the big bits here, and there is the small thin stones out of that hole. I mean, come on. You have to be amazed when you see something like this and like that hole. It's, well, I think it's interesting. I'm not sure anybody else does. Anyway, let's carry on to the next interesting thing. I think we've now covered 9, well, what I would say were extremely interesting, but some may say remarkable things about this field. Do you remember though, Sylvia and Philip were very clear. This place, they said, was just boring rocks and grass. Well, I think we've established that the rocks are rather more interesting than they may first appear. But what about the grass? Is this, is this just grass, all this stuff? I'll tell you something now that proves that it isn't. And it's this. Drum roll, please. Is this just grass growing from mud, which is sitting on rock? I knew you'd be impressed. But if you look at all the maps from the earliest to the most recent, this particular piece of grassland has always been called Hill Rigg. And this raises the question, who or what is Robin Hill? And why did they have a rig? A good question, Sylvia and Philip. Thank you for asking. To understand this, trying to work out how to say it, you need to remember something from your school English lessons. Do you remember something called a diminutive form? This is where a word is shortened, normally to create an informal version of it. And now I'm trying to think of some now. I really should plan these videos before I start to talk. Oh yes, for example, mummy and daddy are normally shortened to mum and dad. People's names can also have diminutive forms. For example, Margaret to Maggie, James to Jim, or William to Bill. And today we might shorten Robert or Robin to Bob. But in medieval times, Robert or Robin became Hob, not Bob. Also at that time, it was normal to believe in the supernatural and to make mischievous spirits like brownies and goblins less scary. They were given friendly names. For example, the devil was referred to as Old Nick. Fairies were called the good folk. This was, I think, to tame the concept of them, so they didn't sound as scary. By the late 15th century, Robin Goodfellow was a well-known name for a troublesome nature spirit. And because Hob was a common medieval form of Robin, he was also known as the hob-goblin. So Robin is simply the longer form of Hob, the goblin. Hill is much simpler. It comes from the Anglo-Saxon Hill, and it just means a raised area of land. And Rigg comes from the Viking higr, meaning a ridge, a raised strip of land along the top of a hill. So Hill Rigg, this place, is actually the land at the top of Hobgoblin's Hill. I told you this piece of grass was interesting. Well, I think it is anyway. How many people, even the locals, know what Hill Rigg actually means? Anyway, Sylvia and Philip, I think I've proved once and for all there always is something interesting. Always. Wherever you are, you just need to look. And occasionally it may help to get out of your car. Anyway, thanks for watching.